Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the furnace-warm breath of ancient Nubia, where the sun hangs low but still heavy, and the sand under your feet feels like someone preheated the entire landscape just for fun. You're arriving exactly at the moment when the afternoon heat starts shimmering off the dunes in soft waves, making everything blur, like your vision is politely asking, "Are you sure you want to be awake for this?" You're here to wander, to listen, to feel the textures of a desert world where brewing beer wasn't just a hobby, it was a genuine survival strategy. And yes, you probably won't survive this heat without a vat of something cold, or at least coolish to sip. But you'll try. For now, as you stand in the wind that smells of dust and distant river reeds, remember the CTA, because I promised I'd say it exactly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And go ahead, let me know your location and local time in the comments. Probably something more forgiving than Nubian desert high noon. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first slow steps across the hot sand, noticing how your sandals, or if you're stubbornly barefoot, your poor sizzling toes, sink slightly with every movement. The desert has that funny way of swallowing sound, so the world around you feels hushed, almost padded. Even your breathing seems louder than it should be. And that's the exact atmosphere ancient Nubian brewers lived with day after day. A world of sand, river, heat, and long stretches of silence, where your mind drifts, your muscles slow, and every little detail becomes oddly important. You head toward the faint blue ribbon of the Nile in the distance, the only reliable water source in this land where the sun acts like it's getting paid per hour. As you move, that shimmering haze makes the horizon look like melting glass. A few palm clusters lean lazily in the distance, as if they're also trying to nap through the afternoon. This is where brewing began, in a place so hot, so dry, that even a warm beer would have felt like a blessing. And don't worry, no one's expecting you to chug anything. You're here to quietly observe, like some mildly sarcastic spirit drifting across time. A small settlement comes into view. Nothing dramatic, just rectangular mud brick homes clustered like sleepy animals resting in the sun. Roofs are flat and sun-bleached, walls throw small, sharp-edged shadows. You can almost hear the soft scratch of reeds brushing one another as a breeze passes through them. At the center sits a shaded open area where giant clay vessels, zir jars, are arranged in a loose circle. They look like oversized beehives, each one smoothed to a gentle curve and sealed around the rim with leftover bits of clay. Now you understand why you're here. This is one of the earliest brewing spots, a place where Nubian women, because yes, historically, women handled much of the brewing, began experimenting with ways to turn grain, water, and desert time into something drinkable, nourishing, and even ceremonial. One mainstream historical fact you feel settling into your brain like a pebble in a sandal: Nubian beer wasn't just some fun weekend beverage. It was an essential part of daily life, part of rations, part of taxes, part of hospitality, and part of ritual. You approach a low hut where the smell of damp grain hangs in the air. Not unpleasant, just earthy and warm, like walking into a bakery where the air conditioning is retired. Inside, a woman is stirring something inside a wide bowl, not with dramatic force, but with a lazy rhythm that perfectly matches the sleepy atmosphere. She glances up at you, gives the faintest acknowledging nod, and continues stirring. She knows why you're here. Everyone in ancient narratives always knows why the mysterious time traveler is creeping around their grain supply. It's fine. Your modern brain might be tempted to ask about yeast packets and temperature controls and any semblance of sanitation standards. But here's your first quirky tidbit. Nubian brewers sometimes left mashing bowls outside for long stretches to see what natural yeasts would drift in on the desert breeze. Yes, they were basically playing microbial roulette with the air. Historians still argue whether this was intentional genius or just "we'll try anything once."
Outside the hut, you hear the flutter of a few ibis taking off from the riverbank. Their wings beat slowly, lazily, like they're also trying to conserve energy. The Nile's smell reaches you. Cool mud, fresh reeds, a hint of something green and alive. You follow that scent because, in this heat, your instincts tell you to chase water like a thirsty golden retriever. At the riverbank, you're greeted by a sight that feels stage-managed for maximum serenity. Smooth water drifting past, sunlight playing lightly on its ripples, soft rustling reeds that make a hush-hush sound like nature's own ASMR loop. You crouch near the edge, cupping your hands in the water just to feel the relief. Even the fish swimming lazily below seem more chill than modern fish, probably because they haven't invented anxiety yet. Now that you've cooled off slightly, you follow a pair of young helpers carrying woven baskets, each filled with grain that glints pale gold in the sun. They're walking toward a shaded clay platform where other helpers are dry roasting some of the grains. The smell hits you. Nutty, warm, and slightly sweet, like the world's oldest attempt at making granola. One of the kids turns to you and shrugs with a silent look that can only be translated as, "Yeah, it's hot, but what else are we supposed to do? Not roast grain? Please." The roasted grains will go into the mash soon. The unroasted ones will join them later. You're starting to realize this early beer wasn't exactly the bubbly drink you might imagine. Today's brewers in this region were leaning toward a thick, nutritious, porridge-like concoction. A drink you could snack on. A drink you could chew if you were committed. Something you might sip after a long day of being alive in a place where every day felt approximately 41 degrees Celsius. There's something soothing about watching this process unfold at its slow desert pace. Everyone moves deliberately. No rushing, no clattering metal, no timers going off. Brewing here feels like part of the landscape. The sand, the sun, the river, the grain, the people, all working in a kind of sleepy harmony. You wander back toward the central brewing area, following the sound of soft laughter. A group of women are crushing roasted grain with large grindstones. The rhythm of stone on stone becomes a kind of mesmerizing lull, like nature's version of an old washing machine. Every grain crackles softly as it breaks, filling the air with a low, comforting rasp. You watch a while, losing track of time, and one woman gives you this subtle side smile that says, "See, even you could do this if you weren't melting." You notice something important here, another mainstream historical point. Nubians of this era often used barley and emmer wheat, both hardy grains that thrived near the Nile. This wasn't random. It was a practical response to the climate. They needed crops that could survive both heat and unpredictable flooding. And those grains, by happy chemical accident, made excellent brewing bases. Someone beckons you over to a clay vat half buried in the ground. Inside, there's a bubbling mash that looks, well, it looks exactly like what you'd imagine an ancient proto-beer mash would look like. Thick, beige, and glooping very slowly. A wooden paddle rests nearby, its handle warm to the touch. You pick it up and give the mash a gentle stir. Immediately, you feel the resistance, like stirring warm oatmeal. A few lazy bubbles pop on the surface, and for a second, it feels like the mash is trying to say hello. Or possibly trying to escape. Hard to tell. One woman points to the surface and says something in an ancient dialect you can't fully understand, but the gist is clear. That bubbling means the desert yeast is doing its job. Her smile is proud, the same smile every brewer makes when fermentation is happening and nothing has caught fire. You step back into the sun, which somehow feels hotter now, even though the shadows have lengthened. The dunes beyond the settlement look like rolling waves frozen in mid-motion, and the heat gives them soft edges that almost blur into the sky. You feel the wind shift ever so slightly, warm, but carrying a little dryness that hints at evening.
A goat ambles past you, looking like it hasn't made a single urgent decision in its entire life. It flicks an ear, observes you with the expression of someone rating your fashion sense, and moves on. You drift toward a storage hut where earthen jars line the wall. Some are sealed, some are drying after being washed. Here comes your next quirky tidbit, delivered not by words, but by subtle evidence. A few jars have faint reddish staining inside. That's from a local root they sometimes use to tint or flavor the beer. Others have flecks from herbs that, based on their faint smell, gave the drink a slight bitterness, possibly a precursor to later flavoring traditions. Historians still argue whether these additives were intentional innovations or accidental contamination from nearby cooking or ritual spaces. Either explanation fits, honestly. Desert brewing sometimes walked a very thin line between culinary masterpiece and we'll pretend that flavor was on purpose. People begin gathering in the open cooking area as the sun eases toward late afternoon. Fires crackle gently, throwing warm light across smiling faces. The heat from the flames blends with the natural heat of the desert until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. A woman pours a ladle of thick beer into a clay cup and hands it to you. You lift it, take a cautious sip, and taste something faintly sweet, slightly sour, warm, earthy, and surprisingly comforting, like liquid bread with personality. There's a strange sort of relaxation that comes from sitting among ancient brewers. Maybe it's the slow rhythm of their work, or the way the settlement glows in the amber light, or maybe it's because your brain is quietly shutting down from heat exposure. But there's a deep sense of calm here. These people aren't rushing, they aren't multitasking, they aren't obsessively refreshing any apps. They're just brewing, being, existing, and sharing. A few children pass by with clay tablets marked with small dots and incisions, the early accounting signs for grain storage and beer distribution. You catch a glimpse and smile, because even in antiquity, someone always had to do the paperwork. It's comforting in a weird, bureaucratic way. The sun slips behind the dunes now. The sky turns gold, then orange, then a deep indigo that runs like ink across the upper horizon. The air cools to something tolerable. People settle on mats, talking softly. A soft breeze filters through the settlement, carrying the smell of grain, clay, and reeds. You take a breath and feel the day's heat finally loosening its grip. And as the village hums around you, brewers wiping their hands, children laughing softly, ibis returning to roost, you feel the story ease forward, ready to slip into the next layer of ancient Nubian brewing life.
You wake slowly into the next stretch of the journey, not with any dramatic shift, but with the quiet, gradual awareness that the desert morning has already warmed the world around you. The village is stirring, soft footsteps brushing the packed earth, low voices murmuring near the grain piles. There's no formal transition, just the sensation that you followed the flow of Nubian time straight into the heart of grain work, where the real magic of ancient brewing begins. You wander toward the grindstone area again, guided by the steady, rhythmic scrape of stone on stone. It's the kind of sound that feels older than language itself, a slow, circular rasp, soft but grounding, like someone sharpening the edge of the day. The early sunlight paints everything in a warm gold, catching on dust motes swirling lazily in the air. A gentle breeze brushes your face, carrying that unmistakable scent of barley and emmer wheat, toasty, earthy, almost like someone spilled breakfast into the sand. Right away you notice something different. Everyone is busy prepping grains today. And not just any grains. These are meticulously sorted piles of barley, some darker and more roasted, others pale and barely cracked. You kneel beside them, feeling the textures under your fingertips. Coarse split kernels, flour-like dust, even the occasional stubborn pebble that somehow snuck into the harvest. One of the brewers gives you a patient look that says, "Yes, we know the pebbles are annoying. No, we can't make the Nile stop delivering surprises." You take in the layout. Grindstones arranged in pairs, one flat and one domed. Baskets of roasted grain, shallow clay trays holding partially sprouted kernels. The sprouted ones catch your attention. They look lively, almost cheerful, their tiny rootlets poking out like messy hair after a nap. This is malt, ancient style. Your mainstream historical fact for this section slips in naturally. Early Nubian brewers malted grains by soaking them and letting them sprout, then drying or roasting them. This unlocked enzymes that converted starches into sugars, the essential food for fermentation long before anyone knew the word enzyme. A woman gestures for you to help with the grindstone, and even though your upper body strength in this era is roughly office chair champion, you sit beside her and place your hands on the top stone. She gives you a nod and begins pushing in a slow figure-8 motion. You follow her lead, and the stone glides over the grains with a soft crunch. The result is a coarse, warm-smelling meal that collects in a neat crescent along the tray's edge. It's meditative, the kind of work your modern life simply doesn't offer. There's no timer, no urgency, no multitasking, just the steady circular movement and the subtle drift of your thoughts. After a few minutes, you realize you've been watching your own hands more than the scene around you, hypnotized by the simple rhythm.
Someone nearby lets out a small laugh, the kind that teeters between friendly amusement and "look at the adorable time traveler trying to grind grain." You give them a tired smile, and they return to their own task, roasting another batch of sprouted kernels over a low, crackling fire. The smell deepens, takes on a caramel tone, like ancient dessert pretending not to exist. While the roasted malt cools, helpers carry baskets of unroasted grain toward the washing area. You follow them, stepping over small channels carved into the packed earth. These channels are clever. They divert stray water, keep the ground firm, and help prevent the huts from washing out during unpredictable Nile floods. Historians still argue whether these channels doubled as early cooling trenches for pottery or were strictly for drainage. The evidence is, well, sandy. Down by the river, washed grain spread across woven mats set out in the warming sun. You crouch beside one mat, letting grains fall through your fingers like tiny pebbles. They make a soft pattering sound, like dry rain. Birds cluster nearby, cautiously eyeing the feast, but politely refraining. For now. A group of children is experimenting with something to the side, pounding small amounts of grain, adding water, sniffing it, then frowning dramatically. You lean closer and one proudly tells you they're trying to see which mixtures smell most ready for brewing. It's half science experiment, half childhood mischief. And there's your quirky tidbit. Some Nubian villages relied heavily on smell testing mash readiness. believing certain aromas signaled the presence of the right wild yeast. No thermometers, no hydrometers, just noses trained better than your Wi-Fi router. As you stand, a warm wind pushes in from the south, ruffling your clothes and carrying whispers of distant dunes. You follow the breeze back to the hearth area, where the air is thick with steam from pots of soaking grains. This is the early mash phase, mixing cracked grains with heated water to soften them, letting enzymes begin their quiet, invisible work. Steam curls around your face and the air smells like breakfast cereal with ambitions. You watch as a brewer dips her wooden paddle into the mixture, stirring patiently, listening more to the sound than watching the surface. That's something else you start noticing about Nubian brewing. Sound matters. Brewers strain their ears for tiny pops, subtle shifts in bubbles, changes in how the mash glugs against the pot. Even your modern brain finds it soothing in an ASMR kind of way. While the mash heats slowly, you wander toward a shaded clay bench where a few elders are seated, weaving reed baskets and swapping wisdom. One sees you approach and begins telling a story about an old brewing mishap, something involving a batch that fermented too quickly, a pottery jar that cracked dramatically, and a goat that was unjustly blamed for starting rumors. The elder cackles at their own punchline, and you can't help laughing along. You don't know half the details, but the vibe is universal. Ancient brewing accidents probably made excellent gossip.
Historians still argue whether early Nubian brewers intentionally varied the roast levels for flavor or stumbled onto it by necessity. Maybe a batch got too much sun, maybe someone forgot to pull it off the fire in time. But what's clear, even from the archaeological remains, is that Nubians experimented more than many early cultures. Their grain mixes show variety, their roasting patterns aren't uniform, and their pottery indicates they were constantly testing new shapes and sizes, probably shouting, "This one will definitely not explode," to each other across the village. As the mash thickens, helpers carry buckets of river water in a slow but steady stream. The water is added carefully, sometimes to warm the mixture, sometimes to cool it. Temperature control here is intuitive, guided by the feel of the bowl and the experience written in the wrinkles of the brewer's hands. You place your palm on one clay pot, and the warmth is gentle, almost comforting, like a warm compress someone gives you at a fancy spa you definitely can't afford. Your attention shifts to the grindstone area again, where a fresh batch of roasted malt is ready. A brewer hands you a handful, motioning for you to taste. You chew slowly, and the flavor surprises you. Sweet, warm, nutty, almost smoky. It's like ancient candy, but also like something that could break a tooth if you weren't careful. You smile, and she nods with an approving chuckle that says, "See, that's the good stuff." Back at the hearth, the mash has reached a thick, velvety consistency, steam rising and swirling ribbons that catch the sunlight. The paddles move slowly, coaxing the mixture toward readiness. You notice the brewers occasionally lift a bit of mash with their fingers, testing its stickiness, its warmth, even its elasticity. It's intuitive chemistry, the kind done by feel rather than formula. A small debate breaks out between two brewers about whether the grain was soaked long enough last night. One insists it needs another hour. The other shakes her head and points to the bubbles forming at the edges. The conversation is light-hearted, but passionate, because even in ancient times, people absolutely argued about brewing methods. You're impressed, but also slightly amused. You kind of expected someone to pull out a clay tablet labeled Brewing Guidelines, version 3.4. One brewer gestures for you to look closely at the mash surface. You crouch and watch the lazy formation of tiny bubbles, slow, deliberate, like the mash is learning how to breathe. These bubbles are the early signs of fermentation, triggered by natural yeasts drifting through the air and settling into the warm mixture. No one can see the microorganisms,
but everyone respects them like tiny, invisible deities. You move toward a nearby hut to escape the sun for a moment. Inside, it's cooler, dimmer, and filled with the soft rustle of stored grain bags. The air smells dry and faintly sweet, with a hint of clay dust. You lean against the wall, letting the shade sink into your skin. A gentle joke slips into the moment. Your modern self is clearly not built for this level of ambient toasting, and if the brewers had Fitbits, they'd probably have to add a desert survival mode.
Outside, the mash has begun its slow transition. Helpers lift heavy clay pots with practiced ease, pouring the warm mixture into larger vessels for the next phase. The mixture flows thick and smooth, leaving streaks along the clay walls. Wooden paddles scrape the last bits into the communal vat. As the day warms toward midday, you can feel the desert pressing closer, the air thickening, the ground heating, the shadows shrinking. But the work continues. Brewers circle the vat, stirring, checking, murmuring observations to one another. You stand among them, sensing the shared pride in this process. This isn't just food or drink. This is memory, tradition, and survival packed into each grain. Someone hands you a small clay cup containing a thin, warm sample of early-stage mash water. You sip it cautiously. It tastes vaguely like bread broth mixed with sun-warmed water and the whisper of something sweet deciding if it wants to become alcohol. Not delicious, but comforting. A transitional flavor, a promise of something better. When the mash reaches its perfect consistency, the exact moment only the elders seem to know, the vat is covered with woven mats to protect it from drifting sand and overzealous birds. The brewers step back, wiping their hands on their garments, smiling with that particular satisfaction of having completed a key step. The sun climbs higher, painting the dunes in sharp-edged shadows, the air shimmering like heated glass. You step away from the bustle for a moment and gaze across the desert, noting how quiet and expansive everything feels. This is a land that demanded creativity, patience, and resilience. And beer, thick, nourishing, cooling beer, was one of the region's most persistent answers to the challenges of the climate. As you return to the village, the brewers have begun preparing for the next phase, transferring the warm mash into fermentation vessels. But that's a story that will unfold slowly, in its own time, just like everything else here. For now, you settle onto a mat, feeling the heat soften into a heavy blanket around you, sensing the story easing forward again, deeper into the brewing heart of ancient Nubia.
The air has softened as you wander back toward the central brewing area, and the sun now hovers in that gentle zone where it still warms but no longer sears. Clay jars dot the shaded tents like sentinels, their rounded forms catching subtle shadows. You step carefully around them, noticing their variations. Some are tall and narrow, others squat and wide. Each bears marks of use and repair, and faint fingerprints etched by generations of careful hands. The vessels are the backbone of Nubian brewing, the stage where heat, grain, water, and time perform their slow, deliberate ballet. You find yourself beside a partially buried jar, the sun casting a halo over its rim. Steam curls lazily from a mash recently poured inside. You can see the subtle ripples across the surface, almost like water disturbed by a gentle breeze. The paddle you pick up is smooth-worn, its edges darkened by repeated contact with sticky grains. Every stir you make is soft, yielding to the natural rhythm of the mixture. The sound, thick liquid scraping clay, becomes hypnotic. You realize slowly that this is the meditative core of brewing. The mash isn't just being stirred, it's being coaxed, encouraged, and softly guided toward life. Nearby, a younger brewer adds herbs to a separate jar, and a faint scent of wild fennel and river mint floats through the air. This is your quirky tidbit. Some brewers experimented with herbal additives not only for flavor, but for slight preservation, believing certain leaves encouraged the right kind of fermentation. Historians still argue whether this was a ritual choice, a flavor experiment, or a mild superstition, but your nose finds it unexpectedly soothing. The fragrance, mingling with the earthy aroma of grain, creates a calm, sensory tableau that feels almost intentionally designed to slow the mind. You follow the movement of the paddles, noticing the subtle differences between jars. One mixture seems looser, bubbling more actively. Another is thicker, clinging stubbornly to the clay walls. The variation is deliberate. Nubian brewers had learned through trial and gentle error that the shape, size, and exposure of a vessel influenced fermentation, sometimes more than the ingredients themselves. A mainstream historical fact emerges. These large, clay fermentation jars, often partially buried to regulate temperature, were crucial in sustaining steady fermentation under extreme desert conditions. A soft laugh draws your attention to the edge of the shade, where a child tests a small clay cup filled with fresh mash, holding it up to the light as though inspecting sunlight itself. The child's expression says, "This will be good or it won't, and either way, I'm learning." It's charming and chaotic, a reminder that the practice of brewing was embedded deeply in everyday life. Everyone, from elders to children, had a role in this slow, nourishing process. You pause near a corner tent to watch a gentle debate unfold. Two brewers discuss the placement of their jars, one arguing that morning sun exposure accelerates fermentation gently, the other insisting that full shade preserves flavors best. Their conversation is soft, patient, without urgency. Historians still argue whether these micro-adjustments truly improved flavor or were culturally reinforced habits passed through generations. Regardless, watching them, you realize the debate itself is part of the craft. The careful observation, the small adjustments, the patience required in desert brewing.
Around you, the desert hums softly. Winds stir the mats covering other fermentation jars. The rippling shadows play across faces, hands, and paddles. Every movement is slow, deliberate. You notice that the mash bubbles differently when touched, producing tiny pops that resonate like whispered secrets. This is why clay and placement matter. Subtle vibrations can influence the behavior of wild yeasts. You reach into one vessel, gently poking the surface, and are rewarded with a soft rise and collapse, a tiny private demonstration of fermentation in action. Stepping into the open, you follow a narrow trench where cool air trickles past partially buried jars. This ingenious method prevents the mash from overheating. The desert can be merciless, but Nubians discovered ways to moderate nature's extremes. Your senses catch the faint aroma of roasting grain nearby, an ongoing balancing act between pre-roasting for flavor and leaving some grains raw to ensure fermentation takes hold. Each action seems small, but is actually critical. Every vessel, every stir, every herb contributes to a larger, slow-moving story of flavor, nutrition, and survival. A particularly curious jar catches your eye. Reddish streaks line its inner walls. You kneel closer and notice tiny flecks of unknown herbs, probably collected from nearby riverbanks or traded by passing merchants. The subtlety of their aroma is almost imperceptible until you breathe in deeply. This is another fringe tidbit. Some jars included crushed roots or leaves, thought to influence fermentation speed or taste. You're not sure if it's superstition, culinary experimentation, or proto-chemistry, but either way, the effect is real and observable. Nearby, a young apprentice works diligently with a large woven sieve, separating coarse husks from finely ground malt.
The rhythm of their hands and the soft patter of sifted grains blends into the desert's natural soundscape. The rustle of reeds, the distant river flow, the low hum of people moving deliberately. You feel yourself absorbing the rhythm, your modern anxieties fading in the warm, slow cadence of ancient work. A mainstream historical moment presents itself. Nubian brewing was not a solitary pursuit. It involved cooperation, careful timing, and shared knowledge. Each step, from soaking, sprouting, roasting, grinding, to stirring and managing herbs, was communal. This shared labor reinforced social bonds, provided nutritional security, and created a kind of slow, collective mindfulness. You recognize the meditative quality of the day. No one rushes, everyone moves in harmony with temperature, sunlight, and the slow chemistry unfolding in each jar. As the day progresses, more jars are lined up under woven shades or partially buried pits. You note the clever use of textiles and clay combined to protect the mixture from errant sunlight and drifting sand. Even the smallest tents and matting contribute to consistent fermentation conditions. The ingenuity is subtle but profound. These aren't just vessels, they are carefully curated microenvironments, each one a tiny climate-controlled chamber designed for the slow creation of nourishment.
A soft breeze lifts sand from the surrounding dunes, drifting across the open area in lazy ribbons. You inhale deeply, tasting the mixture of heat, grain, herbs, and river life. There's a quiet absurdity to it, a gentle humor in the desert, insisting on cooperation with its human neighbors. You imagine someone centuries later studying this scene and debating whether minor jar imperfections were intentional flavor experiments or accidental artistic touches. Historians still argue, of course. Moving closer to the processing area, you notice the preparation of fermentation starters. Some brewers sprinkle crushed malt into water-filled jars, observing tiny bubbles forming. This early fermentation technique, using previous mash or spontaneously captured yeasts, is your quirky tidbit for the section. No lab equipment, no precision measurements, only careful observation and hands-on experience. The results are remarkably reliable, despite appearances of randomness. You sit on a low mat, letting the gentle desert heat kiss your skin as the mash bubbles steadily. The slow stirring, rhythmic conversation, and soft laughter create an immersive environment. Even as a modern visitor, you feel the timelessness of the scene. People, vessels, grains, and river collaborating in quiet, sustained patience. A goat wanders past, calmly ignoring everything, as if it has always known that nothing in Nubia can be hurried. Not the river, not the mash, not life itself. You smile at this tiny absurdity, acknowledging the slow humor inherent in existence here. By mid-afternoon, you sense the transformation. The mash has thickened, herbs have infused, bubbles rise and pop in lazy patterns. Every jar, every stir, every small adjustment contributes to a living process that is both scientific and artistic, communal and personal. You watch, still, fully absorbed, allowing the sensory and temporal rhythms to draw you further into the Nubian experience. You notice a particularly clever setup. A jar partially buried, shaded by a stretched textile, placed adjacent to a small stream of water. The mash's temperature remains remarkably stable. A mainstream historical fact confirms your observation. Partial burial and strategic shading were essential methods for temperature control, enabling fermentation even under harsh sunlight. The subtlety of these techniques amazes you, revealing the ingenuity required to thrive in a desert environment.
Your attention drifts to the smallest details, tiny cracks in the clay, smudges from previous batches, slight variations in the grain size, and the faint aroma shifts from jar to jar. It's mesmerizing. These small elements, unnoticed by casual eyes, are the unsung heroes of Nubian beer, shaping flavor and texture in ways the modern mind might struggle to appreciate. By late afternoon, you lean back, brushing dust from your clothes, feeling the slow pulse of the desert around you. The jars hum with quiet life, the paddles rest after long stirs, and the community has settled into the soft rhythm of patient observation. A final quirky note for this section: some jars contain traces of crushed dates or wild honey, added experimentally to test sweetness and fermentation impact. Historians still argue whether these were flavor enhancements or accidental inclusions. But to you, sipping the faint aroma in the air, the effect is undeniably pleasant. You exhale, recognizing that you have witnessed something rare. Not just brewing, but a fully realized system of food, culture, and sensory artistry moving at the pace of sun, river, and wind. And as shadows lengthen and the village hums quietly, you feel yourself becoming part of this rhythm, ready to follow the journey along trade, taste, and communal rituals in the next section.
The late afternoon sun begins to soften, draping the village in warm amber hues that make even dust motes seem precious. You stroll slowly along the edges of the brewing area, feeling the heat ease off your skin, letting the desert exhale after a long day. The jars of fermenting mash glimmer softly, some covered with woven mats, others partially exposed, teasing you with gentle, rhythmic pops from within. You notice the subtle variations, bubbles rising more rapidly here, slower there, a quiet, almost musical cadence that draws you closer. Your footsteps lead you toward the drying racks, where malted grains hang in long strands. You pause, reaching out to touch the warm, slightly rough texture, feeling the sun's residual heat. A mainstream historical fact settles naturally into the scene. Nubian brewers dried their malted grains in the sun to halt germination and stabilize sugars, a method essential for creating consistent, drinkable beer. You can almost hear centuries of experimentation in these fibers, the accumulated wisdom of countless mornings spent under the same sun. A child nearby laughs softly, shaking a small sieve of grains to watch the dust fall like tiny golden clouds. You lean down and scoop some into your palm, noting the faintly sweet aroma that has intensified after hours of sun. The grains feel alive in a quiet way, soft yet stubbornly grainy, reminding you that even inanimate objects can carry the warmth and character of those who've handled them for generations. Across the open space, a pair of brewers debate the merits of slightly different fermentation durations. One insists that a longer soak will bring out deeper flavors. The other argues that it risks over-fermentation and undesirable sourness. You watch their gestures, the careful tilting of jars, the measured stirring, and you sense the subtle humor threaded through the discussion. Historians still argue whether the variance was intentional experimentation or simply the product of environmental unpredictability. But you, standing quietly, can appreciate the delicate balance at play. You wander over to the paddles, noting the soft sheen of fermented mash clinging to each wooden surface. Picking one up, you stir a small jar in a slow circle. The sound is mesmerizing, slightly wet, slightly sticky, a rhythm that feels as old as the desert itself. You feel a gentle, almost sleepy amusement, imagining yourself centuries from now giving a TED Talk on optimal stirring speeds in ancient Nubian brewing. Nearby, a woman adds crushed herbs and occasional date fragments to a jar, watching intently as tiny bubbles gather around the infused particles.
This is your quirky tidbit. Nubian brewers experimented with botanicals, believing certain flavors not only enhance taste, but might suddenly encourage the right wild yeasts to flourish. There's no modern lab, no controlled environment, only intuition honed by centuries of trial and sensory observation.
You notice a small shaded nook where the youngest apprentices sit quietly, observing the bubbling jars. They whisper to each other, comparing textures, aromas, and sounds. One of them imitates the rhythmic pops with a finger on the clay, giggling softly. The innocence, curiosity, and patience coalesce into something almost sacred. A living classroom without teachers, structured by shared attention and tactile memory. Walking further, you see jars placed strategically near partial sun and partial shade. A slight breeze rustles the mats covering them, and you realize that these placements are deliberate microclimates designed to maintain steady fermentation temperatures. A mainstream historical fact clicks into focus. Nubian brewers understood empirically how the desert sun, wind patterns, and partial burial could create the perfect ambient environment for fermentation. A subtle engineering feat disguised as routine practice. You lean against a low clay wall, absorbing the sensory tableau, the rhythmic stirring, the soft murmurs, the floating dust, the warmth of sun, and the earthy aroma of fermenting grains. In this quiet, you feel the centuries of accumulated wisdom, patience, and gentle humor. A small breeze brings in the faint scent of river water mixed with herbs, adding a sweet, calming overlay to the dominant malt aroma. A minor dispute arises over the addition of water to one of the jars. One brewer argues for a slight dilution to moderate fermentation. Another insists the mash is already perfectly balanced. Their voices are soft, tinged with humor and patience rather than urgency. Historians still argue whether the water-to-mash ratios were standardized across villages or entirely intuitive. But watching this, you understand it's a living, breathing process, not a formulaic one. Nearby, you notice the preparation of secondary vessels for transferring partially fermented mash. The clay is carefully inspected for cracks, warmth assessed by hand, and placement adjusted to avoid the harshest sunlight. You watch as a young apprentice gently pours the mixture, the mash flowing thickly, leaving smooth trails along the clay walls. Each movement is deliberate, almost choreographed, a dance of hands and gravity that has been refined over centuries.
You step back to watch a broader view of the village brewing scene. Jars are aligned under different shades. Apprentices move silently with tasks, elders monitor fermentation progress, and the aroma of grains, herbs, and faint sweet notes of dates fills the air. The soft ambient soundscape is hypnotic. Tiny bubbles, light laughter, paddles scraping clay, and the occasional soft wind passing through reed mats. It feels as if time has slowed, allowing each step, each stir, each breath to unfold fully. The sun begins its slow descent, casting elongated shadows across the jars. You feel a gentle tug of fatigue, the kind that comes from immersion in repetitive, meditative work rather than exertion. You take a deep breath, savoring the complexity of smells, the gentle clinking of clay, and the visual poetry of heat, dust, and slow bubbling. A small humorous moment breaks the meditative flow. A goat wanders too close to the jars, sniffing cautiously before retreating with what seems like a deliberate air of judgment. You smile, imagining the goat as the unofficial quality control officer of the village, silently approving or rejecting experimental batches. As evening approaches, the ambient temperature drops slightly. You watch the last stirring rounds, the careful sealing of jars with mats, and the gentle whispers of advice among brewers.
This transitional period, the moment when active work begins to yield to passive fermentation, is soothing in its predictability. You feel a deep sense of continuity, as if the desert itself participates in guiding the process, ensuring each jar receives its own careful measure of attention and protection. You linger near the partially buried jars, letting the evening calm wash over you. The air is cooler now, carrying subtle notes of fermented grains and herbs, a gentle reminder of the living process within each vessel. A quirky tidbit floats to the surface. Sometimes tiny ants were allowed to pass near the jars, believed to help aerate the mixture, though historians still argue whether this was practical, accidental, or a mild superstition.
You lean back against a shaded wall, eyes half closed, absorbing the soft murmurs, the rhythmic popping of fermentation bubbles, and the slow descent of the sun. You realize you have been following an invisible cadence, one orchestrated by centuries of practice, patience, and keen observation. The village exhales collectively, as if acknowledging the day's labor and the promise of tomorrow's continuation. The last rays of sunlight glint off the clay vessels, warming them one final time. The air feels heavy yet gentle, carrying aromas that tether you to this moment, and you sense that, for the first time, you are truly part of the rhythm of Nubian brewing, the slow, deliberate, and quietly humorous process that transforms humble grains into living, nourishing beer. Evening has settled fully now, softening the desert landscape into shades of amber and dusky purple. You wander slowly among the clay jars, each one exuding the gentle, sweet tang of fermentation. The bubbling sounds are quieter now, more like a lullaby than the midday chorus of activity. You pause beside a partially buried vessel, resting your hands lightly on the sun-warmed clay, feeling the subtle vibrations of life inside. This is the quiet heartbeat of Nubian brewing, the intimate, almost sacred pause that follows hours of patient labor. The apprentices are seated in a loose circle nearby, quietly observing the elders make final inspections. You notice the subtle interplay between instruction and freedom. Hands are guided softly, advice whispered, corrections made with humor rather than authority. You watch as one apprentice tilts a jar slightly, noting the flow of mash, then nods to an elder who silently confirms approval. This communal teaching method is almost hypnotic in its rhythm, a blend of guidance and autonomy. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind effortlessly. The fermentation process could take several days, sometimes even weeks, depending on temperature, vessel shape, and the naturally occurring yeasts. You recognize that patience was not merely a virtue, it was a necessity. Each jar had its own personality, responding differently to the same touch, the same sun, the same herbs. No two batches were identical, yet each was valued equally. Nearby, you catch a small, quirky detail. One jar has a few wild fig leaves tucked into the mash, believed to enhance flavor and attract beneficial yeasts. Historians still debate whether this practice was experimental, ritualistic, or purely based on taste preferences. You inhale the aroma, finding it surprisingly pleasant, almost floral, a gentle whisper of the land itself woven into the fermentation. You follow the subtle path toward the edge of the village where the final stages of processing take place. Clay funnels are lined with reed mats, catching any overflow from the jars during the last careful transfers. Helpers move with a calm precision, each gesture deliberate and unhurried. You can feel the collective breath of the community syncing with the process, the ambient rhythm of the desert lending a soothing cadence to every movement. The sun has now dipped low enough to cast elongated shadows across the courtyard. You notice the interplay of light and form, how the jars glow warmly against the dimming sand. It feels almost ceremonial, a visual echo of the slow transformation occurring inside the clay vessels. A soft breeze carries hints of roasted grains, herbs, and faint river water, a sensory tapestry that anchors you firmly in the moment. A child giggles nearby, playfully blowing on a small vessel, watching bubbles rise and pop in response. It's charmingly absurd, a reminder that even in the most disciplined craft, joy finds its way. The humor is subtle, gentle, perfect for this sleepy, reflective pace. You smile, recognizing that the same playful curiosity probably guided Nubian brewers for generations, nudging them towards small, beneficial experiments that shaped taste, texture, and technique.
You approach a low bench where a few elders sit, quietly evaluating the fermentation jars with practiced eyes. They make minor adjustments, repositioning a mat, tilting a vessel slightly, adding a touch of water or herbs here and there. Each gesture is a whisper of accumulated knowledge, the quiet articulation of centuries of observation distilled into action. Historians still argue over the precise reasoning for every adjustment, but the harmony and subtle humor in their methods are unmistakable. As the evening deepens, you notice that shadows lengthen, the desert wind cools, and the village exhales in unison with the settling mash. The jars hum softly, each bubble a tiny lullaby. You sit back on a mat, feeling your body and mind sync with the rhythm. The fermentation is no longer just a process. It is an ambient, living presence, a gentle guide into calmness. Your eyes drift over the jars lined like sentinels, each one harboring its own tiny ecosystem of wild yeasts, grains, water, and herbs. You can imagine the subtle taste variations waiting to be discovered. One slightly sweeter, another more earthy, another infused with a whisper of floral notes from the fig leaves or mint. The meticulous care, quiet experimentation, and deep communal knowledge are tangible in the air, almost as if the jars themselves exhale the history and humor of countless brewing days. You notice a particularly clever setup, a jar partially shaded, partially exposed, with mats draped just so to balance warmth and airflow. The mash within moves lazily, rising and collapsing in gentle waves. You realize this is the culmination of centuries of trial and observation, where even small adjustments, sunlight angle, jar depth, wind, become crucial to nurturing the living brew. A soft joke drifts through the air from an elder, a quip about last week's rogue batch that apparently fermented too enthusiastically. Laughter ripples quietly across the courtyard. You grin, appreciating the timeless humor woven into every stage of this slow, meditative craft. The moment is peaceful, intimate, gently absurd, and profoundly human. The sun finally disappears behind distant dunes, leaving a cooling violet glow that softens edges and smooths shadows. The ambient desert sounds, the faint rustle of reeds, distant river trickle, soft murmurs of apprentices, blend into a lullaby-like cadence. You watch as the last checks are made, mats arranged, jars left to continue their quiet transformation through the night. You lean back fully, feeling a slow relaxation seep into your body. The scents, sounds, and gentle rhythm of the village envelop you. The desert, the jars, the people, they all seem to breathe in unison, a quiet testament to the patience, humor, and ingenuity of Nubian brewers. Slowly, you close your eyes for a moment, letting the soft ambient sounds and faint aromas carry you into the next phase of the night, where the fermentation continues in silence, and the lessons of patience, observation, and subtle joy linger in the air.
The desert night deepens, soft and quiet, folding the village into gentle shadows. You breathe slowly, letting the warmth of the day linger in your skin, the earthy aroma of fermented grains wrapping around you like a familiar blanket. The bubbling jars, once active and lively, have quieted into soft, almost whispered rhythms. Their gentle, irregular pops become a lullaby, a reminder of the slow, deliberate magic that exists in simple, patient work. You notice the subtle, soothing patterns in the village, mats arranged with care, jars standing in measured formation, the occasional movement of a hand checking for heat or aroma. Every motion is unhurried, each step deliberate, each breath synchronized with the quiet life of the fermenting mash. The desert seems to lean in, offering a comforting hush, a gentle encouragement to pause, to observe, to exist. Your senses drift, the faint sweetness of malt, the whisper of herbs, the soft cool of evening air brushing your skin, the distant river murmuring in the background. Even the soft laughter from earlier echoes faintly in memory, a tiny punctuation of joy and human presence. You feel a slow, expansive relaxation take hold, as if the rhythm of centuries of brewing wisdom is seeping into your own heartbeat. Time slows. You exhale fully, releasing tension and surrendering to the gentle cadence surrounding you. The jars continue their quiet work, transforming grains into life-sustaining nourishment. And you understand, without needing words, the patience, humor, and ingenuity that shaped this practice. Let the scents, the soft pops, and the desert's hush guide you gently toward rest. Imagine the mash's quiet transformation continuing through the night, the village humming softly, the stars above bearing silent witness. Your body sinks into comfort, your mind untangles, and you drift toward a peaceful sleep, carried on the subtle, steady rhythm of ancient Nubian brewing.